Hello and welcome to the Body Align Pro podcast. My name is Isaac Osborne, founder and CEO of Body Align Pro. In this podcast, we interview practitioners who use Body Align Pro and some of the leading experts in the health industry who are committed to taking a scientific approach to improving the form and function of the body and the growth and development of their practice. This podcast is available on YouTube, Facebook, Apple Podcasts, and Stitcher. Be sure to check out the show notes for links. To learn more about Body Align Pro and how you can start tracking posture and range of motion with photos and videos, visit bodyalignpro.com. Welcome to episode 13 of the Body Align Pro podcast. In this episode, our guest is Ed Barrera. Ed is a HANA somatic educator, holistic health advisor, and author of Amazon bestseller Move Like an Animal. He has 15 years experience helping people find natural pain relief through somatic exercises, which are the reverse of most approaches since it is a brain and body unexercised system to muscle lengthening, recovery, relaxation, and control. In this episode, we talk about pandiculation, somatics, connective tissue restrictions, and how muscle memory, muscle coordination can potentially affect connective tissue restrictions, fibromyalgia, the brain, and much more. Here's Ed. Welcome to the Body Align Pro podcast. Thank you very much for joining me today. I'm very excited to have you on the show.
And thank you for inviting me, and I'm really super pumped about being here.
Yeah, let's geek out.
All right.
So I first read your book, Move Like an Animal.
Right.
And I absolutely love your explanations on there. And I think it would be important for our audience to kind of know who you are and how you got into movement work and where you started with all of this before we dive into all the nitty-gritty fun stuff that we were just talking about a minute ago before we started the recording. So please give us your background before we start with all the other stuff.
Okay. That's a great question, and I'm going to sort of let you know about my professional training and how that happened along the way.
Uh-huh.
But literally, I got into this work, what I call it as acts of being a human. And so what I want to start out is many, many years ago when I was quite young, and I was hit over the head with a full champagne bottle. Whoa. And, jealous girlfriend. I was 21 at the time. So understandably so on her part that she was angry, but the action has led me down to the path that I am today doing. Well, what I didn't know is that this would actually lead me to eventually some 15, 17 years later getting the diagnosis of fibromyalgia.
Oh, wow.
So in my 20s and 30s, I lived with it. No one's familiar with fibromyalgia. It's essentially chronic body-wide pain. And so I had pain throughout my entire body. It would shift around, move around. And thus, I began this journey of trying to get out of it. And fortunately, I was living in Germany at the time when this happened. And so I started down the road of massage because they said, okay, we'll go and do massage. And then they were doing cupping. And I thought, oh, this is all great and wonderful. But it didn't fix the problem. Then I came back to the United States. Mm-hmm. And then I came here to actually work in the field of the motion picture business that I worked in my 20s and 30s. And while I was in that field, I was going from city to city trying to figure out how to get better. So like a lot of people, I did the usual approaches, massage, chiropractic. I tried many types of chiropractic, many types of massage, to where eventually then I went to people like yourself. I started to go to Heller workers, Rolfers, Bonnie Pruden type of workers where, and this was back in the day when it was a lot of elbows and knees, right?
Right.
And yet my experience is my muscles were not able to let go. And that always kind of bothered me. It's like, why am I getting just such short-term relief and not long-term relief? So then I started to go even further down the rabbit hole and started to do a lot of alternative therapies, trying to get help with that. I did the conventional therapies, physical therapy, right? And, a lot of icing, a lot of heating pads. I had to beg to get a TENS unit back in the day. Right. And so I used to go to sleep with a TENS unit, and I had the ice packs on, and I had the heating pad on. And of course, before that, I was in the Epsom salt bath for about an hour. Then I used to have a CPAP machine too. So this is how I geared myself up in my 20s. Mm-hmm. It's not surprising that I wasn't getting a lot of dates at that time. So, so eventually I overcame this primarily through movement and exercise. And that's when I was 3 months into a program and a system, and it was the first time I felt balance in my body. And I had this moment where I thought, if I could feel like this, I wonder how many other people could be helped by such an approach or other approaches. And that's what actually led me out of the motion picture business. But I wasn't yet out of the woods. So I still had another 5 months to go. At that moment, it was like 3 months into it. I had another 5 months to go before finally I realized chronic pain would no longer haunt my life. So I was so impressed. So I did a training called Muscle Balance and Function Development. And this was based off of the work of Pete Egoscue down in San Diego. Mm-hmm. And essentially, we're looking at postures. Mm-hmm. And so I was trained to read postures, but more importantly is how to put exercises together for an individual. So rather than finding, rather than just going by a script, mm-hmm. it was more or less, okay, here are exercises that a person is deviating from in a certain plane. Mm-hmm. So let's work with planal correction. So we would start with correcting the frontal plane, and which at that time it was like, okay, that's the most important plane to correct. You can correct the sagittal plane or transverse plane. And if you do those kind of things and you miss the frontal plane, you can get some relief for the person, but you can't really put them together, right? So start with the frontal plane and then work the next obvious planes. But then you had to work the person in segments. So if they needed more upper body, trunk, lower body, whatever you needed to do to resolve it. And it was real simple. You had your selection of exercises. You could do 2, 3, or 4 of them. Have a person stand up, because you'd begin with, a standing posture check. Mm-hmm. If they stood up and they went further in their compensation, then you knew, okay, let's take that one out, because that one is taking you further in your compensation. And so then you would find the right one that would help that person. So at the end, you could literally see the shift in body posture.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Okay. And so I did that. It's called Muscle Balance and Function Development. And I started working with people. I took some training in resistance training specialist to kind of understand a little more about biomechanics. Mm-hmm. So I got really fascinated with all of this. I got back into life myself and started to play soccer again. And wouldn't you know, sure enough, got my knee meniscus torn. I was slated for surgery. A sports acupuncturist buddy said, hey, they got this somatics thing going on. Maybe you should give that a try. So I went home. I dug the book out by Thomas Hanna. I totally mangled the exercises. Mm-hmm. And there's a reason for that, is because I was used to exercise. So I would just go for it and go for range of motion, right? And, hold that wall sit. Well, if they said 3 minutes, and obviously 1 more or 2 more minutes would be better, right? That's my mind thinking there.
This is the thing that happens all the time with my clients. It's like, if a little bit's good, a lot's got to be great.
Exactly, because we want more, right? We're all just like, we want more of this. If it's working, let's do a little more.
Right.
Well, the system that I was doing wasn't working for me. I couldn't bend or straighten the leg. I was basically, it was just kind of caught. Mm-hmm. So I worked with some other people. I wasn't getting any relief. I started to do Feldenkrais. Mm-hmm. And Feldenkrais is just easy, gentle movement patterns, mm-hmm. which is similar to the work of somatics. But I never had experienced somatics exercises from a trained professional, and that makes a huge, huge difference, okay? So I was working with the Feldenkrais practitioners, and I was like, wow, this is like really cool stuff. Let me check into this training. Well, the somatics training was coming up, so I decided, well, I'll do that first. And if I don't like that, I'll jump on over and explore this Feldenkrais thing. Uh-huh. Well, that was in 2001, and I am still a Hanna somatic educator. So that's what I do professionally. And essentially, what we're working with is the brain, and specifically the motor cortex, and how you can use the motor cortex to your advantage to reset tension levels. And when the tension levels are reset, you tend to feel a lot calmer, a lot more relaxed. But as a byproduct of that, you're also working neuromuscular function. So if you know, a lot of people come in and they'll tell me they have muscular weakness, right? They were told that. Well, now my understanding of neurophysiology is a lot different than, well, is it weakness, or is the thing just not firing and you haven't fired it up in a while, and therefore things have atrophied? And so why don't we go in there and play with this in very gentle and easy ways? And I actually was in the third or fourth day of the training, and I thought these people were crazy because I couldn't bend or straighten the leg, and they were having me do what I thought at that time was quite exotic movements. And I couldn't do it. The athlete in me is like, I can't even do this simple stuff, man. What's going on here?
I had the same experience when I first started movement work. I was like, this looks really easy. And I was trying to do it, and I was like, my body was shaking, and I could barely do it. I couldn't do it. And it blew me away that I couldn't do it.
Yeah. And you know, and so here I was, like, about week 3 it's a 3-year training, by the way. So it's a 3-year training program. And so about week 3, all of a sudden I started having these wonderful releases. And I remember going out on the patio because I used to practice Tai Chi. And I had an old Tai Chi teacher that used to tell me, look, a lot of people do Tai Chi. They don't feel it. So, and what he meant by that is they don't feel the chi. So if anybody's into the martial arts and they're used to, you know, going to the energetic state where you feel either endorphins or some kind of flow, it's a different way of presencing or feeling your body. So I guess I had been doing Tai Chi because first you got to learn what the patterns, and you're stumbling all over yourself, right? You're trying to hold your chi ball, and you know, I was kind of looking around, okay, chi ball, great, whatever. But then I started to get in the flow of it. But it wasn't until I had that huge release, and I remember as I was out in Nevada, California, and I thought, I don't think that I've ever moved like this. I was moving and flowing in such a wonderful, in my mind, magical way, because now all the chemicals were, you know, flowing through my body, just like when you get that nice endorphin high. I had some of that, but other chemicals that were happening. And I thought, this is just amazing. This is quite incredible. All we did was simple movements. And I'm out here now doing a bigger standing up movement, because when we do these somatics exercises, we do everything on the ground. It's right, like being a child, right? Everything's from the ground up, and you don't have to do anything standing up. And I'll explain about that later on. So anyway, I had this great experience with it. And that was my first aha that I might stick around. And as I said, since 2001 now, I have taught, you know, thousands of classes now to people throughout the world on how to do what is actually known as a pandiculation.
So that's one of the questions I actually have for you here, is that because you mentioned pandiculation in both of your books.
Right.
And I would love to dive into that further with you, because it's a very, very interesting concept, especially if you're really used to the exercise, go get 'em mentality of go, go, go. And from a somatic standpoint, the pandiculation aspect and how that translates into both.
Simply, this is the other side of exercise. Okay? I like to call it the unexercised method. Okay? Because in exercise, we tend to want to ramp things up, right? We want to get stronger. We want to be faster, right? We want to do all the things that we're capable of doing, what we can with the human body.
Right.
You know? Or if, let's say, we go for flexibility, right? What do? We stretch, and then we tend to try and go for more range of motion. So that's our typical way, right? And that's how I came into the program. Like, okay, you've got to do proper biomechanics, and things must be aligned in a certain way so that I'm firing properly and all this. And I got my head turned completely upside down. number one is we were doing these tiny little movements and I was feeling things happening. And number two is like, wait a minute, what is actually going on here? And so what's behind this is that $5 word called pandiculation. So now I know a bunch of people are going to go over to Google and they're going to go Google this term. And here's what Google will say. It's a stretching and a stiffening of the trunk and extremities as when fatigued and drowsy or on waking, often accompanied by yawning. Now that's what Google will tell you a pandiculation is. Okay, so you do that morning stretch, right? You wake up in the morning, and that's the idea of what a pandiculation has been known for. Now, Thomas Hanna was brilliant because he had worked with Moshe Feldenkrais. As a matter of fact, Thomas Hanna brought Feldenkrais over to begin his trainings here in the United States. And the difference between Feldenkrais and somatics is that one key moment of pandiculation. Now, the updated definition of pandiculation would be more along like this. It's a process of a motion or a movement where a series of muscular contractions occurs in part of the body or throughout the entire body, and yawning can be one of a number of responses. So that's the concept. Now, in order for people to really wrap their minds around it, I'm going to take you through a little yawning pandiculation, as we would call it. Because right now, I know they're teaching people how to yawn, for instance, and they're finding out that they're getting nice relaxation responses. And I'm going to add our little somatic difference of, or being more conscious about the pandiculation. So are you game?
I'm game. Let's do it.
All right. So I just want you to yawn. Just go ahead and make a big old yawn.
I've been dying to yawn ever since you said yawn in the first a couple sentences ago.
Well, that's great. That's right. Like, because we don't really understand yawning all that well still today.
Sure. Yeah.
Go
ahead. Go ahead.
Yeah. And this is like, since 400 BC, we've been studying this act of yawning, this yawning pandiculation, to figure out what it is. And there's all kinds of ideas about it. And Thomas said, well, why don't we just do this? So, for instance, you did that, right? So that would be the doing part of the pandiculation. Now, there's actually 3 parts of a pandiculation. So now I'm going to have you focus on kind of a little more of what happened. Just focus on the front of your neck and just yawn again. And then you're going to let that go. Now, could you feel how the front of your neck contracted?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. It went.
Okay, it great. Right. Yeah, you feel the platysma like this. Yeah, exactly. Now, when you do it again, notice if you feel any contraction or movement in your shoulders.
Yeah, my shoulders go up.
Right, and you feel
kind of back a little bit.
Right, so you feel something contracting in order to either pull the shoulders up or back, depending on how we all yawn.
It's not pulling really far back, but it's just coming up and kind of pulling back a little bit. And I also feel my neck my head in a sense, my chin tucking, so my head kind of comes down a little bit.
Okay. Now I want you to do it again and then tune into either your femurs or your hips.
I feel like it feels like my if I had to be real technical about my femurs, that they would feel like they're kind of internally rotating to some degree, but it feels like I'm also pushing out and in at the same time.
Okay, great. So a little abduction, in your case, a little internal rotation. Okay, great. Now do it one more time and notice what's happening. You're sitting down on a flat surface?
Yeah.
Okay, so do it one more time and then feel what's going on with your feet.
I can feel my arches contract.
There you go. So in your case, that's what you felt. This is now how we teach people to be more aware of what muscles what the brain actually does or how it talks to muscles. Because as far as I was taught, this may be different, and this is going to shock some people, is that, or the second part will, is that the brain sends a message to the muscles to do one job: contract, right? So you had this intention, I'll yawn, And then certain things were contracting. Now, originally, you might not have been aware of the fact that your shoulders were pulling back. There was stuff happening in your femurs or your hips and all the way down to your feet. And we have a term for that called sensory motor amnesia.
Uh-huh.
So if a person can't quite feel what's going on, sensory motor amnesia, they can't quite presence these things. And you can try this with any number of people, and they won't feel their shoulders going back.
Mm-hmm.
You know, they won't feel the movement of their hips or the connection down to their feet. And these connections are what's important. You see, animals, right, all of them, oh, well, let me put it this way, all the vertebrate animals, right, are supposedly stretching, but they're not. And that's what shocks a lot of people. And I've had people just walk out of the room when I said that because, well, you've been taught that animals are stretching. But wait, I just said the brain sends a message to the muscles to contract. So that cat, when it's rounding its back, it's actually pulling its belly in. Right. And so, so we think from the outside, oh, look at the cat, it's stretching. Right. Or the dog is doing this, or the dog is doing its downward dog.
Yeah, absolutely. And this is something that I think is so vital for people to understand, because it's something that I say it in a different language to my clients from an aspect of you can't stretch a muscle unless the other side of it is actually contracting. The muscle on the other side has to contract, so the muscle that you're quote unquote stretching or elongating can actually let go, because it needs that neurological the neurological impulse from the other side to be able to go, oh, it's time for me to lengthen because the other side is contracting.
Precisely. And that's kind of what, is new for a lot of people, because with our emphasis always been on stretching and gaining length rather than, wait a minute, if we solely focus on the contraction, then you're then able to notice also what is allowing for length rather than trying to force length. And if you force length, you're going to bump into something that we found out in 1936 happens to contracted athletes. So I don't know if you ever heard of Mabel Todd, but she was working with athletes, and they were contracted, so they were stretching these athletes. Well, afterwards, they actually got tighter. And this is where the term stretch reflex came in. This is one part of the stretch reflex, right? It's like going, okay, so if you stretch something that's tight, great, it can feel good, because people always tell me, well, I stretch and I feel good. Yes, temporarily, but because it's a brain program, all right? So anything we know that we've done and learned is stored down here in the lower brain, right? So we got a pattern. I don't have to think, okay, how do I turn on my computer, right? How do I walk? It's learned. But just because we learned it doesn't mean we have learned it well. So just
so true.
I mean, just find grandma and, remind yourself how long it took you to teach her to actually do an email, right? So
yeah. If she's like, never mind.
That's right. and right, that's the kind of where I'm at with people. It's like, maybe I'd rather do stretching or do my old exercises rather than this pandiculation thing. But pandiculation is actually our natural birthright. We did this as a fetus. Ask any mom, okay? And as a child, you were pandiculating. So throughout life, we forget, and my job is basically to restore this act of pandiculation, and people then begin to remember that they can do this. Yes. And then once you knock down those tension levels, there's also glial cells that are involved that now we know that the brain can get inflamed, and it can keep producing negative inflammation. So if we reduce the tension levels, the glial cells now know how to produce inflammation when it's necessary, just not on demand.
Yeah.
Right? That's sort of the key switch right there.
So in your situation with your personal story about your knee, did you end up ever getting the knee surgery yourself?
No.
So which is quote unquote amazing.
Right.
But in reality, it's not, to some degree, because the tension that you were carrying before you started doing this was influencing the joint in such a way that the joint wasn't able to operate at its prime function, at its capacity to really function, so to speak. So the joint was being compromised, right?
Yeah, the joint was compromised, and it was also an accident. I did get, wedged between two guys, and it was a soccer thing. So I was with my leg extended going for the ball, and they hit me on both sides. And guess what happened? Stretch reflex. My body, because a muscular spasm, right, is a stretch reflex. So if you get a spasm, you get the stretch reflex. So I went into the stretch reflex, and it kept holding.
Yes.
Right. So if something locks up, right, people get their jaws locked or their back is locked up. Like people are, right now, somewhere in America, someone just got a back spasm. They're laying down on the ground, right?
Probably about 1 million people, right?
Yeah. I'm laughing at it, and I don't mean to do that, but it's like, yes, it's happened. They're like, okay, can I breathe? Should I reach for the phone? Who's going to help me? But when you understand this neurophysiology and actually experience it, like you had the little yawning pandiculation, we actually reverse engineer a spasm, for instance, then it's gone. It goes away. Yeah. And so it took me 3 years to get that. And I had to actually watch a squirrel fall out of a tree.
Oh, yeah? Well, tell me that story.
Right. So in the second year of my training, I was at home at the time. And I was just looking out at the woods having lunch. And, I was watching a little squirrel just kind of climb along the limb as it would. And it lost its balance and it just fell head first and hit the ground, right? Oh, right. I was like, okay, interesting, right? And it just kind of got up in a daze and it spun around in circles like it was crazed for a second. And then it stopped. And it did a particular movement. And then it spun around in circles again, and then it did another kind of particular movement. Same thing, but just a little different angle. And so the spinning around started to slow down. It started to stop, and then it started to work out these little tiny movements in its neck and shoulders. Now, I swear this was my experience, right? So
I believe you.
Yeah. So I'm watching this whole thing going on. It seems like it's about 45 minutes that it's working all this out. And then it just does one of these. It just looks at me and says, huh, and then just walked off into the woods like nothing happened. And I was astonished. I was like, what would I do if I fell out of a tree? Right? It's like, in those days, we didn't have cell phones. So like I wouldn't have been able to call you. Right. I was laying out there for like days till somebody found me because I was living on a 10-acre place and I was like way out in the woods. And so, that's why I sympathize with people that have back spasms, because once you understand what you need to do, you reverse engineer this. And just like that squirrel did, you reverse engineer what happened. And that's really what years later I got as the big aha. That squirrel was pandiculating. My dogs are pandiculating. How about if I run the experiment? I'll just stop stretching. And that's what I did. And I have not looked back, because I went back to stretching. I was like, whoa, wait a minute, I'm getting all tighten up again. So I went back to doing the pandiculations, and I have greater flexibility. I'm now 57 years old. I have better flexibility, range of motion, agility, and mobility than I did in my 20s and 30s. And so now I use this stuff, and I'm a U.S. national champion at the senior level. I play soccer, and so I now win a bunch of medals. But, that's fun. But the main thing is the recovery aspect, right? I don't have the recovery issues like everybody else does, because after a tournament, and we play 5 90-minute soccer games in a row, 1 per day for 5 days. And, guys are wiped out and women are wiped out, for a week or 2 weeks before that. I'll have a league game the next day, and I can go back and, quote, move like an animal again, because I, manage what I need to manage accordingly. So that's kind of how I just buy into all of this.
Yeah, absolutely. It's interesting that I love hearing these stories, because your journey and my journey is very similar from the aspect of studying movement, and that there's that prescribing movement aspect is there's definitely a place for it, but this pandiculation aspect of it is how, whenever I've like tweaked myself somehow or through movement experiments, or like that's what I've done without really knowing it and having the language that you're talking about. it's what I've kind of stumbled across and what I've done in my own self exploration. And I'm the same as you. I'm in better physical health and more flexible than I was in my 20s, and I'm in my mid 40s. And it's a wonderful place to be.
And we can maintain it because, I remember years ago when I had these conversations with a sports acupuncturist buddies who said, we're going to have to be 50 or 60 years old before anybody believes us, right? And so now I'm here, folks. I am that guy, and I will run you into the ground, right? It's like, because I've met 20 and 30-year-olds, and they're kind of like, dude. And I'm like, no, I'm just running because it's natural to run, right? But I'm now running like you are, unencumbered.
Yeah.
And the coordination levels are there that I didn't have because the neuromuscular functioning, I'm priming the pump. So, for instance, animals pandiculate 7 to 10 times every morning. Just watch your dog or cat. They'll do their little cute moves, but then they go 40 to 50 times throughout the course of the day.
Yeah.
And what you said was right. You see, innately, we know this, but it's never been explained to us because, the earth went, let's stretch. Although there are lots of parts of the earth, they don't believe in the stretching thing, right? They don't do that. They do like vibration movements. I remember I worked with some Russian trainers and they were all just about vibrating the limbs. Mm-hmm. Well, isn't that what your dog does when you're in a hurry? You're like, okay, I got to get the dog out of the house. Hey, let's go, right? And your dog's like, oh, no time to pandiculate, and it just shakes itself out. It does that vibration. Mm-hmm. So that's sort of like the secondary aspect, if you want to do a quick pandiculation, is just vibrate your limbs, and now you're ready to go. Because what is an animal in the wild going to do? It's not going to be like a human being and go, okay, I need to hold this for 30 seconds. I need to do this one for a minute, right? Animals don't do anything with time. And the more I watch them, I go, oh, so when we do our work, it's really cool because there's no ever 3 sets of 20. You don't do anything for a minute. There's no counting like PNF techniques or you're counting.
Yeah.
Forget all that. You don't have to count. Your animal isn't counting. It's a movement. And that's what makes it different. It's like you had your experience. You got to pay attention to the quality, not the quantity. And if you pay attention to the quality, guess what happens? Your range of motion increases without ever trying. If you try, you can bump in that stretch reflex and things will tighten up again.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And something back to what you just said is that we haven't been taught this, and we naturally did this, and we've actually, to some degree, have been discouraged to do these movements. Sit still, sit down, in class, don't move, some people are naturally more fidgety, so to speak, than other people. And so we've actually suppressed the pandiculation to some degree. This is my opinion. I don't know if, that if you agree with this or not, but this is my opinion, kind of listening to what you're saying. And yeah, like you said, babies do it in the womb. Children do it all the time. But as we grow, it seems like this movement has been more discouraged than anything else. And my wife has kind of hated me to some degree for it. It was like the kids would like get on the couch and jump off the couch and like want to climb the walls. And I was always like, yeah, go for it. She's like, no, don't do that. You can't teach them that. I'm like, come on. We want to get them to like that inspiration of movement. It's so sad to see it suppressed, because then this is where these movement patterns become so ingrained in us, because, or like I should say, dysfunctional movement patterns, right? To some degree, they become so ingrained with us. Would you agree with that, or want to add to that at all?
Yeah, I want to add to that, because Thomas Hanna said that we become acculturated away from pandiculating. So you're right on. Me, I realized it's the alarm clock. That's really what did it to all of us, right? So you're a kid, you got to get up in the morning, right? Your mom's yelling at you, let's go to school. And so the last thing we do is we're not going to pandiculate, because now it's like, oh, I've got to get up, right? It's like, oh, I got to go do that school thing. It seems to be a pain when you're younger. I think it's harder these days And the reason is, in my age group, we walked to school or we rode our bike to school. You can't even go. Some schools today don't even have bike racks, right? It's just like, and I'm driving down the road, and what do I see? The moms are driving the kids to the bus stop. So the kid doesn't even have to walk to the bus stop, right? Which robs us of so much useful time to get into our body and walk in the morning. And then they sit on the bus, and then they go from where? From the bus to the class. And that's limiting everything. So part of that dysfunction is we're limiting all the possibilities to move. And so how do you wake up your system? Walking is fantastic. But like you said, the dysfunctions start to come in from a lack of use and a forgetting to do what is natural to us. Because once you do these things, like when I work with chronic pain people, which is my primary market, it takes a while, okay? We've got to change a lot of the dysfunctional patterns. There's going to be ups and downs in it, but eventually they come through, right? If they stick with it, right? You got to do it. If you don't do it, sorry, it's just not going to happen. And you have to eat well too. So let me just throw that in there. Some of the foods that we're eating are helping perpetuate this. So you're right. The jumping all over the house. I mean, if you see our house, oh my God, it's just you come into our place, we've got a pool table that's wedged up into this room. So you're having to do all this creative pool playing, right? Or we're playing ping pong. We invite our Great Dane to play because the Great Dane now goes after the ball. So you're playing ping pong and you're avoiding the dog. So we had fun as kids with movement. We all played games. We made up whatever the rules were, and we did that. Now kids are so structured, right? I just see the poor kids going to the soccer things, and everybody's just specializing, and all the coaches are worried because we've got to have the great American soccer team. We have to have the great professional football team, and everybody's getting specialized. And I see the number of injuries. My favorite thing to read was the Monday morning injury report of the NFL. And it was just that long, long list. But it's happening to kids in high school now, right? And so I start to think about those things. Why does this still keep perpetuating when basically we're trying to have fun and movement? So we're missing something in the continuum to help people move effectively and restore proper movement. And so that's my belief about all of this. And, you can't stretch things that are contracting or are at high tension levels to bring them back into function.
Or something that's already elongated and at a stretch, so to speak, right?
Yeah. How you got to retrain that, right?
Yeah, absolutely. So with that in mind, because you're kind of speaking to that already, where do you see people failing the most with the work that you do? Where do people, for instance, I want to hear yours first, but where do they fall off? What's the challenge for them with the work that you do?
The greatest challenge is that I teach a simple 3-step method. Okay. So when we did that jaw thing, it was okay, you do the contraction, right? And you feel wherever you can feel to contract. But in the way we teach it is we have a person pay attention to what is letting go. And in the letting go is where you begin to notice perhaps what you didn't notice that you were contracting. Okay? Yeah. And then the third step would be just to simply pause and rest. That's the 3 steps. Step number 2 is actually the key because that's now where the brain then is releasing the chemicals of relaxation. And step 3 is you give yourself a momentary chance to feel what happened. Step 2 is the hardest part for people to get is the slow release because we're always doing. Like I said, this is the unexercised method. So now I'm teaching a person, let's unexercise. Now I know that there's slow kind of exercise groups out there, but I go, this is even slower than your slow and even smaller. Okay, because most of our movements are done at very small levels because we're working with the small muscles that support the joints, not at the big muscular level. That's why you go into a gym, right? And you do that stuff. people that do strength training, for instance, they love this stuff, right? Because number one is they don't know how to unkink themselves, right? They'll do all this crap, you know, and all this stuff right here. And yes, I said crap.
I know. No, you can do all you want on my podcast.
I used to stretch for 2 hours a day when I had fibromyalgia because that's what they said to do. They said, you got to stretch. And I bought all the stretching books and I learned enough stretching that, you know, that was my routine. Anywhere from an hour to 2 hours a day. But I wasn't getting looser. And that's what I loved about this work is, while I got out of pain with the other approach, this approach got me out of pain, but gave me the function and the flexibility and the feeling, you know, different in movement, so that when I apply it on the soccer field, it doesn't look like I'm doing much because I'm not, right? It's just like I'm more relaxed. I can just get to the ball. I'm quicker because why are animals so fast? You know, I always ask guys, I go, you ever see a cheetah pull its hamstring running 80 miles an hour?
Nope.
But yet we run 10 yards and the guy lames up and everybody runs over there and gives him the pickle juice, right? Or whatever. Now there's
ice. Here's some ice.
Oh, ice. Yeah, right. Everybody's got ice. and I'm the crazy guy, right? I'm on the field. Like I see soccer moms and dads and I'm like, oh, you don't need that ice. Of course, I'm the same guy that says, throw away the foam roller. And people are just looking at me like, that guy.
we're two birds of the same feather, my friend. Because exactly what I tell everybody is the same thing. Throw away your foam roller.
Yeah, throw away that stuff. You don't need the balms, the taping, all this kind of stuff. Because, you know, the taping thing's a big craze. And I see all these professional athletes doing it. I'm like going, they're trying to send a message neurologically. Why aren't they just already doing that? And if they knew about pandiculation, which, as you said, if you do any kind of exercise movement work for a long time, you eventually get this.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
It's people don't want to do the slow movement. They don't want to do those, I call them micro movements. They don't want to do micro movements because they don't think they're worth anything. They don't think that, like you said earlier, I have to contract, I have to force, I have to do all this work to get results. And that's where it drives people crazy when I say, okay, that was good. Now go smaller. Okay, that was good too. Now go smaller. Now go smaller again. Like, how small can you do this movement? And what's crazy about it is that people go, it gets harder and harder to do it smaller. And that challenge, it freaks people out. And I also think that, what would you say about people's fears and their emotions and those sort of things getting in the way with the work that you do?
Well, all that's, look, the somatics, the definition is the body experience from within. Okay, and that's the field that I work in. It's more about your feelings. Okay, you got a subluxation. Let's say you went to the chiropractor, they told you your spine is subluxed, right? Mm-hmm. What's the subluxation feel like? What's spinal stenosis feel like? What's herniation feel like, right? So these terms, right? Now I have a term. I'm afraid because I have this thing, right, that I don't know if I'm going to overcome.
Yeah.
Dan Millman, who I met one time, he was giving a talk and somebody said, hey, can you talk about fear? He goes, oh yeah, fear is easy. He goes, it's not breathing. And I sat there and I was like, that's so brilliant.
That is absolutely brilliant.
Isn't it?
This is right on the money.
Right. And so when I work with people, yes, everything is going to come up that's going to come up. So if we're used to guarding and flinching, we don't like to move. If you've ever, you turned around and you got that back spasm, what do we start to do? We start to splint ourselves. We start to protect ourselves. When these protection mechanisms become then wired in our system, then we move less, right? I mean, I can go down any road, or any grocery store in the country and see everybody who's protecting and holding on and compensating. We're just a sea of compensations. I don't even have to look at it anymore, right? It's just there. That's just the way that it is. Now, if you're playing soccer against me, by the way, I'm checking your compensations out, and I'm going to drive you into your compensation.
This is what I tell you.
Right? So that by the 60th minute of the game, I look like I'm blowing by you. I'm still going the same speed, but now you're too stoved up. You can't catch me. And that's just how it works, folks.
I love it. I love it.
But yeah, but to get back to all of this, to break through these fears that we have comes when you actually have the experience of relaxation. Once you start to have these experiences that you can count on and then you can replicate. So I have a new book coming up, and it's taken me this long to kind of figure it out. Because for years I've been telling everyone, you don't have to do the movements. If you're hurting, don't do the movements. Imagine doing the movements. You are going to get the same results. We know this, right? We know the studies where you had a group of people playing basketball. They have the imagined group that they shot, the group that shot, and the group that didn't do anything. The people that didn't do anything, well, they didn't get better.
Right.
So you get a 2-for-1 if you can imagine, because that's turning on the brain pump. So now I have in my new book, or actually in the video training, I don't have it in the new book, I actually have this in the video training, I teach people, let's do this imagination. And by golly, mostly all of them get better range of motion because we didn't go for range of motion. We didn't do that big movement, right? And then if someone gets into a spasm, which can happen, then we coach them out of it and go, okay, here's how you reverse engineer it. And now go back and do the movement. No spasm. And they're amazed by that because we focus, like you said, focusing on the small. You're right. Everybody wants to go big because that's the big thing. And I tell everybody, if we just make this much improvement, that's what leads to this, which gets to this. And this is only a series of these. And you have to go back to the fundamentals, which is why I always joke with people, your cat and dog have been trying to teach you how to pandiculate for years. And when you actually start to do this with your animals around, they love it. They start to cozy up next to you. And then you start to learn more about your animals and how they're pandiculating and how you can kind of unwed some of these exercise concepts out of your brain. Because look, I'm all for exercise, okay? It's like, or actually I'm all for whatever movement you want to do. You want to go play golf, you want to go play tennis, you know, you want to ski. I'm a skier. I love skiing. And I was horrible when I first learned how to ski in my mid-30s. I still had the fibromyalgia then. I'm now light years away from that. And all I've got to do is pandiculate during the off season. And I go back on, click in, and I make that first turn. And it's like, nothing's really changed. I'm older and I'm surprised because like you're probably challenging the work you're doing all the time. And you get surprised. You're like going, I'm getting older. I can still do it.
Yep. Was it 4 years ago? I'm a surfer, and surfing typically has a goofy foot or a regular foot, so one direction. Same with snowboarding and skateboarding. Right. Skateboarding, I grew up surfing, skateboarding, and snowboarding, and back in the late 80s or so, skateboarders started doing more movements, what was called switch foot, and now skateboarding today is like, there isn't really skateboarders who are goofy or regular so much because all their stuff is so interchangeable. So about 4 years ago, I started surfing. I'm a goofy foot, so I started surfing regular foot. And it was amazing, the experience in my body and how much that helped my body in so many different ways, from compensation patterns and joint stiffness and also my surfing itself improved. This is like, you know, I'm at 40 years old and I'm starting to learn something completely brand new. Most people don't want to take the time to do that, but it's been so valuable for me from a standpoint of, I mean, there's a laundry list of things. So I absolutely agree with you. It's very amazing to be able to change these patterns in your body and the amount of freedom that you get in your body from doing it, especially those micro movements, especially resetting the body in that way from these movement patterns. And like you, I totally agree in the sense that there's no such thing as bad movement. And what I tend to say is it's only when we get stuck in a certain movement pattern that it becomes bad or dysfunctional.
I laugh because I'm always telling my people, you know, because they want to know, because everybody wants to know what's the right way to do it. Yeah. And I get it because we've heard the messaging, right? I must do it like this, and this is the proper way to do it. And then So now they want to do it the right way. And so I joke with people all the time. I go, if you find the right way, will you call me or email me? Because I'm still looking for the right way. Because it's a matter of coordinating our movement actions. And like you experienced there, right, it's because the same thing in snowboarding when they used to, put the 1 foot forward. Now everybody just does whatever they want because they're getting it now. It's that this thing can move in multiple directions. And we've got to go back in a way to our childhood when we developed and we were trying to figure out, how do I get to the toy? So I got to lift my head or arch my back. But you see, that was the kid who was living in the sensory experience of it, right? And now as an adult, that's, this goes to our problem. It's like, well, we have to explain it to an adult. They got to get it in their brain that small is the right way. It seems so hard to do. What's actually harder is to stay focused.
Yeah.
Because when I teach these things, I tell people, okay, I can give you a few movements when you're brand new, just a few things. But if you really want to get the real experience, you got to spend a little more time. It's sort of like, it's like baking. You can pull it out of the oven earlier, right, and eat it and go, or bake it to what you need. And so each of us need whatever we need. And people just want to, I tell people all this. I know you guys want to find the one move that you can do in 4 seconds so that you can get on with your life.
Right.
You get there when you master this approach. Like I've mastered this approach. But even this morning I got up and I'm like going, I'm going to be doing this podcast. This is awesome today. Hey, I got some time to lay down. So I started laying down. And the next thing, what happens to me is I start getting in these nooks and crannies and I'm releasing all this and I'm starting to feel good. And then, let me reach for the phone clock. And I'm looking at the phone. I'm like, oh, man, this is a bummer. I got to do this interview because I really wanted to be on the floor.
It's funny because I was doing the same thing. I did a bunch of strength training last night. And I was like, there's a little stiffness here. And I was just doing all this pandiculation and working it all out right before.
I mean, this happens to me like when I prepare for soccer, because I play like a local pickup game here on the weekends. And I'm notoriously late, as they say. But I always tell them, no, I'm on time because I show up when they're ready to play. Guys get there and people are doing their limbering things and they're moving their body around and everything. I'm like, guys, I already did that at home. When we were a kid, we went to play. We went out and we played, right?
You're on.
Right? It's like we didn't do any warm-ups or whatever. We didn't do any cool-downs. You just moved your body and played because we already had enough of that software pandiculation in us. Now we just restore it. And, the mindset, of course, I get it. We're locked into, I have to do this, right? I have to do my exercises. I get that. That's a hard mentality. But like when I had my fibromyalgia, I realized that I was sitting too much. This is back in the 80s and 90s. And I realized, I think sitting is my big problem, And I used to tell physical educators, and they're like, no. You can counteract all that with exercise and everything. And now today we know you can still do tons of exercise. And if you work for 8 hours a day, guess what happens? And you're sitting.
Yeah.
You didn't go forward. So we've got to figure out ways to move throughout the course of the day. And if you learn to pandiculate, you can actually sit and pandiculate to your heart's content.
Oh, yeah. 100%.
Yeah.
So with all this pandiculation, we're essentially, it's like we're talking about muscle memory and muscle coordination. And the big buzz these days is fascia. And it's really getting a lot of attention, which is great, which is absolutely great. However, I think the focus on the fascia is a little bit too microscopic, and which is, again, I'm trying not to cut out all the wonderful research that is out there and all the sensory nerves that's in fascia, and these are all great realizations, and in a lot of ways, I think it speaks to what you're talking about. But in your experience, because it's people might be mad at me for saying this to some degree, but manual therapy like chiropractic, structural integration, Rolfing, manually working someone else's tissue is what I've termed recently. I tend to term it more dead end therapy, because it's having something done to you. Now, I'm not trying to say there isn't effectiveness. There's definitely, like, going to a chiropractor, get that subluxation fixed. Yes, it helps. But in my opinion, what I've kind of termed it more recently is it's almost like it's emergency medicine, right? Or the restrictions get so bound up. Yes, you need help there. But it's always this type of movement work when the person works from the inside out, right? Because only you can change you.
Precisely.
Right? Only you can change you. So it'd be interesting to hear your perspective on how does it change the fascia? Because the focus has been, to some degree, how outside influence changes fascia inside the body, not how inside influence changes fascia.
Well, there it is. There it is, the conundrum, and this is why, a lot of people, myself included, had to get my world turned upside down in terms of this terminology and understanding. It's experiential. What you're talking about is passive therapies.
Mm-hmm.
We all have an experience of it. Okay. Mm-hmm. So if you're pushing on something on me, that can either feel good or not good, right? Are you trying to lengthen something? It can feel good or not good. Okay. I have an experience, but you're doing it to me.
Yeah. And that's where I want to be clear and say that when I say dead end therapy, because it only takes you a certain distance.
Right.
Right.
What it can't do for you, and you're right on, is you have to do the movement yourself in order to get that brain to fire off the message. Now, if you're pulling me this way, great, that feels good. I'm maybe feeling some lengthening going on there, whatever, right? That's all well and good, but afterwards, now what do I do? What is my follow-up to do that? Now, if you go see a physical therapist, somebody like that, you're going to get a set of exercises, right, to shore this up. Can that work? Yes, if they got the compensations correct, and you can get some ability, you can knock those pain levels down, great. Does that help you become a better mover? That's my question, because it's like, well, it's, I'm holding this, I'm holding that. It's a lot of holding patterns that we're doing, bracing kind of exercises. And I know dynamic stretching is also a big thing now. So, we're doing these things to get people moving. But in fact, this is why I go back to the animals. I go, well, the cheetah is blowing by me. My dog blows by me. My Great Dane just leaps over me, right? And I'm like, who's working on my dog? Right? Of course, and I know now there's dog yoga and all kinds of stuff, right? It's like, and I actually can help dogs too, because I've actually done this work with horses. This was a big eye opener. So, you get a big horse, and now you're going to go, okay, let's have this horse pandiculate, because here's the thing. Pandiculation can get shocked out of our system. So if you grew up in an abusive household and you were afraid a lot for your own life, right? Now those movements to get out cannot, because you're kind of locked in. And so now you're afraid and you're locked in. And these kind of postures over time get sort of armored. Yep. Right. And so now it's real difficult to trust yourself in moving, because bad things happen if you move. So there's all kinds of things that could happen with this. Let's say you got injured a lot, right? And then you just keep having cascades of injuries. So you don't want to move anymore, because anytime you did, you got injured because you really couldn't heal yourself, back to what you needed to heal to. So how does all of this play into what we can do ourselves to unwind tension and rewind, and what I call updating the movement software? And so having it done from the outside, what's really good. So I tell my clients, they always ask me, well, can I do your work with someone else? And I said, sure. If you want to get a massage, great. If you want to go get chiropractic, great. Here's what's going to happen. Your massage therapist is going to notice you're a lot looser. Your chiropractor is going to notice that your adjustments are holding much longer. So you're going to get that improvement. So it's okay for you to have the feeling. But here's the thing. We aren't validating ourselves enough, right? It's like, oh, I need that expert to tell me, right, that I'm okay. But you know what? This can be true because I had chronic pain for a long time. And people were noticing, they were like, Ed, you look like you're moving better. You look like you're moving better. I was so locked into my worldview of it that I was like, okay, maybe it is. But I didn't yet have the sensory awareness and experience, enough confidence to know, oh, yes, that's why I said this is a process if you've been in chronic pain states for a long time, is to regain the awareness and the cortical control. But the fascia, if you will, or can I share a slide here?
Of course.
A couple of slides here. So kind of make the point. So let's see. I need to do share.
And if you're listening on Apple Podcasts, we can put this. We'll put this slide in the show notes.
Okay, great.
On the YouTube channel.
And should I just do this as the desktop or as the keynote?
Desktop is fine.
Okay, great. So I'll do share desktop, and then. Okay, so can you see this slide?
Yeah.
Okay. So if anyone out there is familiar with Anatomy Trains by Thomas Meyer or Kinetic Chains, concise book of neuromuscular therapy, this is kind of, when I first saw these pictures, I was like, oh, this is what we're doing. This is exactly what HANA Somatics is working with, are these chains of connections. Remember, I had you open your jaw, right? And then you start to go, oh, yeah, it's happening there, it's happening there, it's happening there. So we're a system of 17 layers of muscles, 17 layers of fascia now. At least that's what they're reporting, so I'm going along with that. And so when I saw these slides, I was like going, this is exactly what we're doing. And this is why it takes time for people. They've got to kind of understand that it's not just a bicep curl you're working with, right? So for instance, when you do a bicep curl, your abdomen most likely tightened up. So on the same kinetic chain, right? And then, oh, did I do something with my quads to help stabilize because I was lifting this weight? And so these are the kind of concepts that I show my clients. I go, this is what we're really working with. So they kind of go, oh, and once they begin to start to feel things from head to foot or side to side, they start to get it. Now, let me show this other slide here. So this is actually from Thomas Meyer and fascia, all right? So these are now internally how we're all built. Okay, so these are from dissection. So I was playing with one of these models because I think the one on the right starts at the tongue. And so if you're game, Isaac, and go along with this game with me, just stick out your tongue. And that release. And now the next time you stick out your tongue, can you notice any pressure change down in your foot?
Yeah, it's small, but I feel it.
Okay, great. Because a lot of this stuff is subtle, right? And so, and that's like going back to what you said, sometimes we got to give it a little more to get a sense of it, and then we can kind of ease off so that now try this. Do less with your tongue and then tune in again to your foot and notice if you can pick up any subtle clues all the way down that far.
Yeah, I definitely feel a shift.
There you go.
My heels.
There you go. So this is my viewpoint on these fascial connections. We're actually feeling that connection. And so guess what? We have abdicated, in my opinion, going internally. So I think that's the only couple of slides I got to share there. So we've abdicated this going inside. And that's why when you do what I say, the passive therapies are failing, because people need this inside work, as you mentioned, to then put that together. Because then if you're starting to do inside work, you go back to your therapist, because like when then you can tell your therapist, hey, this, that, and the other. And then now your therapist can do other things. And then you can feel things and go, oh, I'll go home. I'll do some pandiculations in this area and I'll work out that knot of tension.
Mm-hmm.
Because when we work as somatic educators, if you watch me work, you would think when I do my hands-on work with people, you would think that I'm actually doing like a physical therapy.
Mm-hmm.
You would see me with my hand on the person and the person is moving, let's say their knee into my hand, for instance, right? Mm-hmm. Let's say they're abducting, for instance. And so now they're abducting, pushing their knee out into my hand, and it looks like I'm doing something to them, but it's all generated by the person.
Mm-hmm.
And my job is to say, where do you feel that? And the answer is, it can be anywhere, okay?
Oh, yeah. Mm-hmm.
Some people are so used to honing in on their pain, they'll go, well, that pain is starting to flare up. Okay, great. Or another person will feel it somewhere else, or they'll feel it in some unexpected way that I always get a nice surprise and go, well, okay, I hadn't heard that one yet. So let's go with that. And then my job is to basically teach them how to ease that tension level so they can feel whatever they can feel as clearly as possible, and then start to use less effort, just like you did, to go, oh yeah, there is a connection there. And certainly you can give more effort, but it's teaching people how to give the purest and the least effort, which is what expert performance is all about, right? When you see expert athletes, they're not doing much.
Right.
But they make the play or they do the thing. You can see then the over athletic person because they're really grinding and trying, right? And the other person just goes by us and smokes them. It's like they weren't even trying.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Dr. Rolf, the founder of Rolf, and she used to like to use the analogy between Fred Astaire and Gene Kelly. The two side by side when they're dancing, the effortlessness of Fred Astaire compared to the hard work and the lack of effortlessness
Yes.
in Gene Kelly. That's fantastic. And those restrictions, like personally, the reason why I asked that question is I was really interested to see if you had the same experience that I have, is that from a structural integration background that I have, we are manipulating the fascia. We're working to manipulate that fascia.
Right.
And when I started doing the movement work over 10 years ago, I started noticing what I would notice typically before I started doing the movement work is those people would come back and a lot of those restrictions would still be there in the fascia. And then when I started doing the movement homework, those restrictions were going away and sometimes completely disappearing. And it's nice to hear that absolutely that what we're doing and how we're working is affecting that. I mean, from that standpoint, do you notice that yourself?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, when I assess a person, typically, if I'm doing a one-on-one, it's a posture check,
mm-hmm.
the various health histories. I listen to more about their feelings and sensations than the diagnosis.
Yeah.
Because here's the thing. We all know this. You can go to somebody else and get a different diagnosis. And that was my case. It took many, many years to get the diagnosis of fibromyalgia, where people said, you didn't even have that. Of course, and now I get the reverse. It's like, obviously you never had that, right? So, but I mean, it's a tool, right? We need to kind of have like an understanding, all of us, to go, okay, this is what it looks like, what it appears to be, the common symptomology. But it's like this. If you're experiencing pain, I remember a young guy coming into my office. He had some elbow pain. After the session, I said, so how's the elbow pain? And he was like, what elbow?
Mm-hmm.
Because that's our experience. Once pain goes away, we're like, what pain? It's just like that memory just shifted out of us. Just like before the pain, we're not going like, oh my God, I'm going to have some pain. But however, if we think like a lot of my fellow athletes do, oh, I'm going to pay for this tomorrow. Oh, I'm not going to be able to get up. Little do we know that we're programming those cells in the brain to produce that, because one of the things you and I and everybody wants to do is we love to be right. Okay, we all want to be right. And so our brain's going to say, tomorrow morning, yes, you're going to wake up and you're going to feel tight because you didn't do anything. You did this activity, this exercise, whatever you did, and it didn't loosen you up because you weren't loosening yourself up.
Right.
You were doing an activity. And the more flexible and looser you are, the more you can sustain your activities and comfortable. And the word you keyed on, which I don't think gets enough in this society, is effortlessness. It is, we're Americans. I can do it. It doesn't say American effortless. You know, it's like hard work if I put in the hard work. Now, for some people, when I do this work, it's challenging because of the mental focus that it takes. That's hard for people, okay? That's where they're challenged. But then, you know, I'll take a quick video of them and I go, look, you were just laying on your back and all you had to do was just barely lift your foot up off of the surface. And I say barely, and people will go 6 inches to a foot, right? So there barely is something, and that's where you and I have to come into coach and go, how about half of that, right? And so let's say they did this. This is their half, right? But neurologically, that's how we all do it, right? Neurologically, we're like, okay, that's my half.
Hey, and can you hold that? Can you hold that thought right there? I'm sorry, someone's knocking on my door. I shouldn't be.
Oh, absolutely. Sorry, I'm on a call right now. Good, how are you? Good. Nicely. All right, thank you.
He's going to be doing my route next Wednesday.
No, actually, I don't need this much. We could go half. Would that be okay? I'll take the pillowcase. That's plenty. Or I could take this and just skip next week. Okay. Do that. Yeah. Skip next week. Thank you, man. Thank you. It was good to get out. Sorry about that. I forgot my sheet delivery was coming.
Well, no worries, no worries. Hey, I want to piggyback on something too, because, you know, what I like to do with my clients is to get them more to focus on their goals. Mm-hmm. And my clientele, sometimes their goal is as simple as being able to tie their shoe, play with their grandchildren, being able to get dressed. I mean, I've got, you know, guys that are just huge, muscular guys, and their wives have to dress them. You know, they can do incredible things with their upper body, but they can't even put their pants on anymore. And all of this spells to me is like, okay, the coordination levels, the whole connection between upper and lower body, brain to muscles isn't happening. We can all do certain things, but to make it that you can just put your pants on or you can tie your shoe, that's that effortlessness, right? The ability to just simply do, which is, you know, then people will counter and say, well, my old dog isn't moving around anymore. And I'm like going, well, number one is, did you keep your dog like in a small area where you're letting your dog out and move? And, you know, look, if you were just giving your dog the same dog biscuits year after year after year after year, I mean, that's like us eating the same meal day after day after day. You know, the system needs a little more than, you know, than just that
variety in there. Yeah.
Yeah. But we all can agree that when you watch an animal move, for the most part, they are effortless. And if it gets shocked out of their system, that's why I go back to when I did this work with the horses, that just to remind the horse, like how it abducts, it would experience the same sensory motor amnesia that you and I would. Mm-hmm. And I didn't really go that, you know, thorough through it, but the other part of the sensory motor amnesia is a loss of motor control. And if you want to have just a few seconds, I'll see if I can find a loss of motor control for you.
Sure. Absolutely. Yeah.
Okay, great. Okay, so what you're going to do is you're going to move your right shoulder to your right ear as your right ear moves towards your right shoulder. So that's going to be the movement. Now, I want you to slowly release that. Okay. Then I want you to do that again. It's just an easy, light movement. Feel the areas that are going to generate tension or wherever you feel the contraction taking place. So ear to shoulder, shoulder to ear.
So the same side?
Same side, yep. And now when you release twice as slow this time. Now, just tune into the feelings and sensations of that side of your neck and your shoulders and compare it to the other side. Do you feel the same or a little different? Or what do you notice?
I feel more activated on this right side, but not from a standpoint of a lot of tension. It just feels like it's more awake.
More awake. Great. Okay. So when you were releasing the shoulder down, did you feel it was smooth, or were there any little hesitations in there?
There was definitely a little bit of there was definitely some hesitations. It didn't feel, from my perspective of feeling, it didn't feel huge, but like little ratchety spots of movement in there.
All right. That's the other side of sensory motor amnesia.
Mm-hmm.
So when you watch a dog or cat or any animal do a contraction, when they release, you may notice these little slight fidgets or hesitation. That is how they, and we as a vertebrate animal, reestablish cortical control. And then just for fun, just do it on the other side so you get a comparison of like, okay, so I did it on my right side. What if that happens on my left side?
Okay. I'm just pinning the video so that it stays here.
Oh, okay.
For the listeners and the viewers. What's funny about that one, just the first thing that caught my attention more than, I'm going to try this side. Yeah, what was interesting about this left side, I felt it in my jaw more when I went on the left side. I felt like a shift in my jaw as I went to the left side and came out.
There you go. So, we're building in awareness by focusing our attention, because really that was this movement. Okay. People are doing this and I'm like going, let's not do that. Let's do what these muscles do, which focus here rather than, okay. So if you want to stretch this side, you got to contract that side in order for it to release. And now it remembers to let go. However, what was that path feeling like to you, and what all did you notice? Okay. And Absolutely. That's just a simple little neck movement, that you can do to sometimes when you get that crick in the neck, sometimes this is just enough. It's like, oh man, I feel like I have this brick in my neck here. It's like going, okay, you want to apply tension into that which is already tense. So that when you let it go, you can feel it. And then when you practice this, you'll actually feel that shoulder drop even more. All right. So for you folks that are out here like this and you can't drop that shoulder tension, because I know it's difficult. You can't just let your shoulders go if they don't know how to do it. It's because the brain is sending this pattern to stay uninterrupted. And so we're interrupting the pattern by actually increasing the amperage of the tension levels within your control without hurting yourself. So if you feel pain, you would back off. And then you just allow for the release. You wait sufficient amount of time. You do it 2, 3, 4 times. That's it. That's why I love this approach. It's simple. It's easy. And you learn so much about yourself.
Oh, so much. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. And I think that's what differentiates it from a lot of other approaches, because as I said, everything else seems to be doing. And this is doing, feeling, and then pausing to feel again.
Yeah.
And because
what's so much fun about this type of movement and this perspective of movement or this practice of movement is that, life is, we all want to try to balance things out in life. Like, so for instance, last night, I mentioned earlier that I was doing some strength training work with weights and bands and all kinds of fun stuff that I love doing. But in between sets sometimes or before and after, I throw in there these type of movements.
Great. Now, go ahead.
Go ahead. No, go ahead.
Well, you just reminded me of Mel Siff. Have you ever read Mel Siff's Facts and Fallacies of Fitness?
No, I haven't.
Great book. So whatever I did, I think my muscle balance and function development training, that was like one of the books, right? And so great little books, got all these wonderful tidbits. Mel Siff worked with Yuri Vereshchansky, and these are the guys that came up with what people are doing in the gym today, the graduated method, right, of strength training.
Mm-hmm.
So Mel Siff had this little, just tiny little paragraph in his book, and it said, the question is, what's the most important exercise? And he said, these are his words, more important than strength training and aerobics is reprogramming the central nervous system computer. And he said, at all stages of training, this must not be neglected. When I first read that thing, right, I was like, all right, what's central nervous system programming? So, right, you know, the pre-Google days, right? So I'm finding all this stuff out, and I'm like going, oh, you know, wobble boards, stability balls. Okay, so that's how you program that in the day, right? That's how you do it.
I'm shaking my head because like, no, not those.
right, exactly. Like, okay, whatever, right? I mean, those are fun things to do, right? Those are fun, challenging things to do. But when I started to do this work and started to realize, oh, the pandiculation is our birthright to reprogram this central nervous system. It's been noted since 400 BC and throughout the ages, you know, what this act was doing without us really realizing. And so now today we have a better understanding of the neurophysiology. Even when I took this training in 2001, there were still just a couple of textbooks on neurophysiology. And now that we understand more about the brain and this connection, as you said, we can use this internal information. We understand the concepts, and then we free ourselves to these effortless states so that when we feel a little tension or a little hookup, we can go right into it. Like you said, you're in the gym and, you know, hey, you may be going for it because you're like, okay, I'm going to try and, you know, improve on my bench press today. So I'm going to add another 10 pounds, 5 pounds, whatever it is. And let's say you go for it and you tweak yourself, right? Like, oh, I just tweaked my back, right? Because it happens in the gym. I mean, I see a lot of people tweaking themselves because they're going for it.
Right.
So I'm going to go work it out now, right? It's like going, yeah, you can. That's the hard exercise approach. But if you lay down and kind of reverse engineered what you did, you can then more quickly get that out. Just like when I walk by in the fields of soccer and people pull their calf, like calf cramps are happening all the time and hamstrings. And I just say, okay, here, and they start to stretch their foot, right? They want to pull that, they want to dorsiflex, right? And I'm like, no, don't do that. And they're all kind of stop and I go, no, trust me, I know what I'm doing. Sometimes there's people who've seen me. They're like, yeah, do what Eddie says. But more often than not, they're not around. I wish they were. But I just say, hey, point your foot. Because that's what, when you're in a state of holding contraction, that's what you're in, right? You're contracted and the foot is put. So let's do more of that. And then you may go into what I call the pucker factor. And it might actually heighten that experience. Like, oh my God, it's going to explode. So rule number one, breathe. Okay, you got to breathe.
Yeah.
And then, because there goes Dan Millman, because I'm afraid now the thing is going to explode because I'm not breathing, right? So you begin to breathe, but you allow for the release. Now, when you're in a spasm state, that release is going to just be flopping all over the place because at that point, you've totally lost motor control because now you're in the spinal reflex area of the body, right? So now to regain control over the reflex, you play with it easy, gently, slowly, and then once you understand these concepts and you've done them enough, then you can hammer it. Then you can point the bejesus out of your foot, and guess what? No spasm. Then you have full cortical control reestablished. That's what's so much fun about this work.
Yeah, that's so much fun. I love it. So my final question for today for you is, because I know you probably have a busy day ahead of you, and I don't want to take up your whole day here. I'm sure we could just geek out for hours.
Could do this all day.
and you do it all day. So what sort of metrics or tracking do you tend to use to educate your clients and track results besides, say, the notes of their symptomology or helping them bring awareness to their symptoms? Do you use anything that you track, I don't know, movement or photos or biofeedback? Is there anything that you use?
Well, it's primarily, somatics, the body experience from within. It's primarily about the experience.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so yes, I do a standing posture, or when I teach all my online classes, right, because you're not working with me in that capacity, it's like, hey, stand up and feel yourself first.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, lie down, let's do the movements, okay? Da-da-da-da-da. Afterwards, you stand up and you feel yourself again.
Mm-hmm.
More often than not, you're going to stand up and feel the difference. You will feel the shift. Then I'll get people to walk. Now, if I've done a hands-on session and taught them some movements, 9 times out of 10, they're going to feel like a drunken sailor. Kind of like when you get a real good massage and you sort of get off the table and you're just kind of like, whoa, what's happening? Because now all these chemicals are flowing through you. But now this time, you generated them yourself. So your walking is just going to be much different. And this is then when I joke with people, I go, we're literally floating in space on the planet Earth. And now you're actually so relaxed that you're floating now in your own space. Mm-hmm. And you now feel how easy and effortlessness it takes to walk, where before you were doing a walking. Right. You were bracing, you were compensating. Now, number one is I see it. As a trained eye, I see the compensations have shifted. So that's like, so yes, I can do a before and after picture. I take a picture. Then afterwards, I can take a picture or wait several weeks so that they can do that. Because a lot of people are into the posture check. So we can do that. Mm-hmm. But it's more important about their feelings and sensations, because that's what we're here for, is like, I got this pain, or I have this thing, right? Mm-hmm. The symptoms then begin to fade away. For instance, I can't sleep, right? So I tell a person, I go, oh, this is easy. You want to do these in the morning. You want to do these in the afternoon. In the morning is when you're tightest, right? And muscles tend to shorten overnight. So do these to get your body prepared for the day, just like your cat and dog does. It doesn't check the email first. It first pandiculates, then it goes to the email. So hold off on the email there. Then you're going to get, life is tension and stress. I don't care. It's just what it is, right? You got to get to work. You got to go do the things you do. All this begins to get amped up throughout the course of the day. This is on top of a condition or symptoms that you're already carrying. So now you're adding this to the recipe. So at the end of the day, just do a few minutes or go through the whole routine, take out that tension and stress. If people were to do that, like, who sleeps well? Cats and dogs, right? They got no problem going to sleep with the freaking TV going on, the stereo blasting, and they're like, I'm out. Right? Now, the human being falls asleep because of exhaustion, right? We're so exhausted from the day and carrying our stiffness and our pains, and we're just literally, And then we think we're going to get restored by sleep. Well, here's the truth. Tension levels do not go down because it's a programming of the brain. Mm-hmm. So if you do some pandiculations or some somatic exercises, whatever you want to call it, you now take down those tension levels and you're able to sleep more effectively. Now, this is coming from someone who used to wake up 60 times per minute. I went to a sleep study. That's how I got the sleep apnea machine. And it was supposed to be a 24-hour study. They let me go early. I'm like, what? It's supposed to be a whole day. Like, no, you have it. Don't worry about it. You're going to the next phase. So now my clients will report that they sleep marvelously, that they're beginning to understand, and all of us know that when we start to sleep better, we function a lot more better, right? The clarity starts to come through, because in a way we're getting rid of the cobwebs. Just like you notice, like, there's a little more relaxation there. I'm aware of my jaw. The more you become aware of yourself, the more you become aware of tension happening, because we can deal with the daily tension because we're so used to it. But if you walk across a busy city street, your shoulders are going to go up like this. Mm-hmm. You may no longer feel that because we get accustomed to it. But as you become more somatically aware, you feel your body doing this, because it's like, wait a minute, there's these objects going by me 30, 40 miles an hour. What am I, you're already going into protection mode. And that's what's so cool with this work, is you go, whoa, my body's doing that. And then you can say, okay, chill out, right? Oh, I can chill, because now you have the capacity and ability to relieve the tension. So this is what people report to me, is that they are able to let go. that they feel the shifts taking place. And it's evident in the posture, and it's real evident in terms of them, feeling they can do things. But this is why I start with, what is your goal? And normally I ask, what activity do you want to do? So if it's just simply being able to tie their shoe, okay, which can be very, very challenging for some folks, right?
Oh, yeah.
Right? Some people want to touch their toes, right? So I go, hey, go do that old, hurdler stretch or something. No, I'm just kidding. But
Go straight to down dog.
yeah, just go do that. It'll be fun. So the thing is, they're going to tell me what they want, and more often than not, most people don't know what they want. Most people in my work have had the chronic pain that they just want to get rid of the pain. That's like number one. And to even think like I can do something, because they've been told you're never going to be able to ski again, or you can't golf again, or you can't play soccer again because of all of these myths that they're hearing. It's because, well, wait a minute, you've got to work on the fundamentals of movement itself. And as Mel Sipp said, don't neglect it. Yep. If you keep going like cats and dogs do, then we know from neurogenesis and neuroplasticity that we're rewiring the brain and the nervous system to have a different response. It doesn't mean that you're not going to get stressed, okay? Because that's what life is. Life allows you to get those shoulders up there because that's what they're supposed to do. But in the middle of it, you can go, wow, this situation sucks. And I'm really oh, wait a minute. Yeah, this situation does suck. Oh, wait a minute. This situation really sucks. But you're able to feel it and see it at a different level, where before you're trapped and your brain is locked in. And, that's how life is. Like when somebody cuts you off in traffic, you can go ballistic. I used to be one of those guys. I'd just go ballistic. Somebody would cut me off. And now it's just sort of like, damn, they got there faster than I did because I left too late, right? Or I could feel my shoulders go up and I go, yeah, he beat me, and so you let it go. And this is why I never understood how somebody could take 1 or 2 aspirin and feel better, right? I never got that concept. I was like, that didn't work for me. Today, if I would take an aspirin or 2, because my body would go, whoa, yeah, let it all go. Because now it can actually feel the effects of something like that differently than it was able to before, because it was dealing with too much noise in the nervous system.
Yeah. Well said, my friend. Well said. So can you give us a short, you have a new book coming out. It's already out?
Yeah, it's out.
I got a chance to go over. I haven't finished it yet, but I'm reading through it. And I like it so far, and the video that you're doing with it. So please give our listeners and viewers a synopsis of what your new book is, and we'll provide some show links. Whatever show links you want to put in the show notes, you're more than welcome to. I'll put them in there. So give us what's the new book?
Okay, so it's called The One Thing to Do to Relieve Pain, Stiffness, Tension, and Stress When You've Tried Everything Else. Now, all of you already know what the one thing is. It's the act of pandiculation. And in the book, I go further into the history of it. I go into pain and how we actually talk about pain, which is different than a diagnosis. So I go into that, how we all talk about it, how we experience pain. But then I also talk about the other side of pain, right? It's like, we have these meters, like we talk about what's your pain level, 1 to 10. Whoever asks you, what's your good level, 1 to 10? How good are you today, 1 to 10, right? It's like, what is he talking about? I'm good. Good is good. Well, is it? So I explain to people like the myriad of sensations and feelings that can arise when you do this, because it can be new to people if you haven't experienced. Like if you've been in states of anxiety and you're guarding and you're fearful, that's your go-to set of feelings. When pleasure and relaxation comes in, it can be a little disarming because you're not used to feeling relaxed. You're always used to being revved up. So I go into the book. So we explore that. And then I go into, traditional type of posture. So I show you, hey, here's posture 1, 2, and 3. And then here are the things you can do. All right. And along with that, I explain to you exactly how the brain does all this. There's even a link to the video which shows you how this works at a neurophysiological level of what motor neurons, because I can even go a lot deeper. We can talk about the alpha motor neurons and the gamma motor neurons, but I'm not going to go there. You guys can check out the book. But here's the thing. This is my opinion. it's hard for me to read that book and do the movements because there's so much going on, just like you experience, right? Okay, I got to do the shoulder and the thing, and I got to feel. Now, I make it super simple, 3 simple steps, right? And I hopefully, I make a good job of letting you know exactly what those are. I go into finer detail because each step has more nuances than meets the eye, so I break it all down for you there. But you get the free video training with the book, which means you don't have to read the book. Just go watch the video, and I take you through the first 2 movements that deal with the specific posture. So that way, your number one is you're led by a professional who can, knows how to articulate and pace it. Because I'm going to be guiding you, because I did this with live classes, with people, so that they would do it slow enough. Remember, the danger is you can do this too fast. So if you read in the book, you're like, okay, I did that. Okay, I got it. I'm done. What's the next one? Right. So the video training will help with that. Now, if you're more nuanced with this, you've been doing types of approaches where you are slowing down, then yes, certainly you can read it. There's pictures in there to kind of give you the guidelines of what it is. I also give you a plan in the book. So here's what you can do. Here is your 30-day plan. And then I actually explain at the end of the book how long it takes to get out of chronic pain and, what we now know from not only my experience, but actually from research as well, too. So that, in a nutshell, is really what it is. And there's a million little bullet points that I can go over. But that's actually will be on the link on that on the website. Do you want me to give the link now, or
just after we're done here, we'll have you give me all the links that you want to put in.
Okay, great. All right. Yeah. So is that enough, or do you want more? Because I can tell you all the little bits in there. But trust me, folks, there's a lot of information in there.
Oh yeah.
I've distilled it so that it's real. It's those 3 steps. Okay, the 3 steps are the whole crux of it. Right. And just like today, we've spent a lot of time for me really to tell you, move, unmove, and feel.
Yeah, it's so true. Well, the human mind has to, we have to know, right?
Right.
And it's awareness and perspective. Sometimes you need the long lecture. And I can attest in your book, you're doing a great job with giving that perspective and how you're explaining it. I enjoyed the Move Like an Animal, and I've been enjoying reading your new book as well.
Oh, well, great. Well, thank you.
Thank you for taking the time today to talk about your work and for us to geek out on here. Is absolutely great time talking with you. And any final words or anything else you'd like to say to our viewers and listeners?
We are creatures of movement. And so, folks, whatever your movement activity is, just go find something that you love to do. And then when you tweak yourself, do a few pandiculations.
Love it. So please be sure to check the show notes, everyone, for links to how to contact Ed, his website, his new book, his other book. I'll have all those in the show notes. And again, Ed, thank you so much for being on the show. And we'll hope to have you again on here at some point in the future.
Well, it's been my pleasure. And thank you very much, Isaac.
Bye. Thank you for joining us. To learn more about Body Align Pro, visit bodyalignpro.com. Not tracking posture and range of motion yet? Level up your practice and download the Body Align Pro app for free on the Apple App Store and start tracking with photos and videos today. Do you like the show? Please give us a review, subscribe, and or share this so others may find us too. Once again, thank you for joining us. Don't forget to check out the show notes for links.